Hey there. Welcome back to Story Time. I am happy to be here. It is Thursday, the last day of August in 2023. Kind of fun. Kind of fun to be back here with you all. And I'm chuckling in response to the comment. Sorry. I'll just show you what I'm chuckling at. That's more appropriate, right? Um, Lots of morals and ethics for today, right? Yes. So here we go. I have been wanting to read this story with you all, and I needed an easy one for today. So here we are. Let's go read the story about David and Bathsheba. And before we do, let me do a quick little shout out to um, all the people that make this possible for me to be here. So I am grateful to all the ways that you all support me, whether it's showing up live, whether it's watching the videos later, or if you're sharing a favorite video with a friend. I appreciate that. I appreciate all the subscribers, people who subscribe to my channel. All these different things work together in lots of different ways to help make it possible. And I appreciate people who support me on Patreon. I am Biblical Bird on Patreon. I appreciate people who read my work. So the published work that I have out there, my second book is called Permission Granted, Take the Bible into Your Own Hands. And it is something that is essentially, it's like taking intro courses to the two primary testaments with me. And whether you get the paperback or you do the Audible, which is read by me. So all those things help. And I do have a book coming out soon. Let's do that real quick. Marriage in the Bible, What Do the Texts Say? That is coming out in November. Unfortunately, it's still a couple months away. September, October. Yeah, 2.5 at this point. But that is essentially what has pushed me to do this Storytime Live. So is this book that's coming out. I'm essentially trying to work through biblical passages that relate to the topics that are central to the book. So the topics central to the book have to do with sex, actually, first and foremost, not marriage itself. Sex, the relationship we call marriage. So I usually put a little air quotes around that because marriage in the Bible is dramatically different from what most people mean by marriage today. It's the primary thing that I'm up to in this book. And then we're also reading passages or stories that have to do, or laws that have to do with some form of physical harm that involves intimate body parts. So those are all addressed, and even some things beyond that in the book itself. But that just seemed like an easy way for me to engage biblical content with people who are interested in thinking about these ideas differently. It's an easy way for me to do that. It's essentially like a long list of calling out a whole bunch of biblical passages. It's really what this Storytime Live is. So if you haven't been here long, please know that I did a whole month every day in June. So there's some content to go back to if you are just new to this particular podcast. I also have, and we'll be starting it back up again, another podcast here on YouTube Live that is does the Bible tell you so? So it's a similar kind of a concept. And in that, I've also just been addressing basic, interesting topics or topics that people are curious about. Does the Bible actually say that sex before marriage is a sin, for instance? No, it actually doesn't. In fact, it's actually much more complicated than that and more interesting than that. The concept of original sin, is it even actually in there? Blah, blah, blah. So that's a separate kind of podcast according to YouTube here in my channel. I also have a podcast that I work on with a literature scholar in Chicago. So we have a podcast called Wild Olive, and the tagline is game-changing conversation about literature, culture, and the Bible. So we just wrapped up season 1. Actually, the final episode of season 1 should drop sometime in the next few days. And then we'll be starting a new season in October. So I'm very excited about that. And let's see. Yeah. So that's that for now. I think that's what needs to be said for now. I appreciate you all being here and commenting and sharing with people. I am also monetized here. I actually feel really weird about super chats. Somehow it's an odd thing to me to ask to have people pay me to ask a question. Maybe I should take it more seriously, and it just feels very odd to me. So I'll get there maybe. But for now, I do appreciate them. It just feels weird to me to ask you all to pay me. And maybe I should just start doing that you only get to ask me questions if you pay me for it. I don't know. Maybe I should. That might actually be smarter, wouldn't it? Anyway, for now, I'm still doing it all for free because just trying to put some content out there, I guess. So anyway, here we are. It is time. Let's see. So I wanted to read the story about David and Bathsheba. And before I do that, so this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to ask you to take a moment, because I do know that people here and watching later have a variety of backgrounds. So you have lots of different ways that you've encountered this content, or maybe have never heard of it at all, right? So when I do a lot, like when I'm teaching in person, I always ask the people in the room, take a minute to reflect on your understanding of this story, if you have one, right? If you grew up hearing about the story, what was the moral of the story? If you have a familiarity with these characters, David, hopefully most people have at least some sort of vague sense of who David is. I mean, goodness, there's a, naked statue of him in the Louvre. Yeah, so people know who David is. But Bathsheba, do you know who she is? Do you have a sense of what her role is in this story? Do you have a sense of her at all? Does she have a reputation in your mind? What is it? What's it based on? How active is she in this story? Just all the things, right? So I like to do that. So I'm kind of chatting about it here to give you a minute to reflect on your thoughts. Right? Before we read the story, because I think it's really helpful to separate what we think, what we've been told, perhaps, and then looking at it with fresh eyes can be a little bit more productive. So I've chatted about that for a minute or so. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to share again because I still haven't finished unpacking and I don't know where my Bible is. And I think maybe it's easier if I just share it to the screen anyway, for everyone's sake, not just because I am currently not fully unpacked. Okay, so here we go. I do this. I comment on the labels and the headings. Here's another heading to comment on. David commits adultery with Bathsheba. Now, that isn't in the Hebrew. Okay, let's be very clear about this. That is something that the translation committee decided upon to help the readers understand what's going on here. I would suggest that this is too kind to David, because it makes it sound like Bathsheba was game. And you can decide for yourself whether you think she was, right? But David commits adultery with Bathsheba is not even a fair representation of what adultery is about in the Bible, either testament. Adultery is about a man having sex with someone else's woman. That's the issue. And so really, adultery is an offense against the other man. So again, this is me trying to be a biblical scholar, trying to be honest about these things so we have a better sense of what's going on in these texts. What a more accurate, in my opinion, title here would be David commits adultery against the husband, or I know it's too long. David commits adultery with Bathsheba, which is an offense to her husband, who isn't even an offense to her man. Like, he actually offends her man because he forces her to commit adultery. Commits adultery with Bathsheba. That is true. It's just it doesn't give you the sense of why adultery is a problem, what adultery actually is, and who is offended. I guess that's what I needed to comment on in this title. Okay, let's just read. And I also saw someone made a comment about the language of divorce in the Hebrew and perhaps even in the Greek, and if that's an accurate reflection of the language. Because if I'm trying to challenge Mary should actually be take, which I think it should, is divorce actually the accurate translation? So I haven't looked into that, but I like that someone asked about that, or kind of pushed, asked, pushed, I like that. So thank you for that, and I will get to it when I can. So here we go. This is one of those really fun story times because it's like once upon a time in the spring of the year, right? The time when kings go out to battle. I mean, it's so funny to me. I mean, it's like in the spring of the year, the time to go prepare your garden for your summer and fall produce, right? Like it's what you do this time of year is go to battle. Okay. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab with his officers and all Israel with him, and they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. Dun, dun, dun. So we have some sort of foreshadowing going on, right? Foreboding music, foreshadowing, right? He's supposed to go, but he didn't. It happened. The thing happened. Late one afternoon, when David rose from his couch and was walking about on the roof of the king's house, that he saw from the roof a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. We're going to come back to this in just a second. Let me just read through this, okay? Because the bing, bang, boom, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am of this is actually part of my point here. He was walking about on the roof of the king's house that he saw from the roof a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. David sent someone to inquire about the woman. It was reported, "This is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the woman of Uriah the Hittite." So David sent messengers to get her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Parenthetically, now she was purifying herself after her period. Then she returned to her house. The woman conceived, and she sent and told David, "I am pregnant." That is all of 4 verses. This is it. That's it. It happened. The thing happens. The major thing happens. It takes all of 4 verses. And then we spend the next chapter and a half looking at how it all plays out for David. Right? Does Bathsheba have any lines? Do we know if she was game? Lots of people, people will want to say, well, she was bathing in a place where he could see her. I got news for you, folks. People don't get to move their mikveh around and, just to catch the eye of the king next door. I mean, her bath is where it is. It just is where it is. It's beyond her control. Okay. She's also purifying herself after her period. So for those in the know, like we're supposed to know that means that she is potentially able to get pregnant in the near future. Obviously, this is all condensed time, right? It takes a while before she knows she's pregnant. But in the story, it's really funny. It's almost as if it happens instantaneously, as if she knows instantaneously, instead of it's going to take at least 6 weeks before she knows. You know what I'm saying? So that means they're all out to battle for 2 months before he even... That's really kind of interesting, don't you think? All kinds of interesting things. So yeah, have you heard that Bathsheba was trying to lure him? She was trying to get his attention. Have you heard people read onto her motivations seduction? Have you heard people turn Bathsheba into some sort of seductress, right? I hope that I hope that you have heard that, because that's one of the main themes that I hear about her. I don't think it's fair. And the bottom line here, in my opinion, is she doesn't have a choice. The king sends for you, and your man isn't around to protect you in particular. What are you going to do, right? He sends for her. He taps that. He sends her home. She gets pregnant, and this is the thing, right? What's also interesting to me is in the story itself, when it says it happened, what is the it? Is the it that he was lusting after her? Is the it that he actually forced her to have sex with him? Is the it that she got pregnant and that forced him to take moves to handle the situation? What is the it part here? Is it that he offends Uriah by having sex with Bathsheba? Because I'm pretty sure the writers at the time, and most of the way it's been handled, this story's been handled in tradition, they're not really concerned about the fact that Bathsheba's been forced to have sex. Right? When I try to bring up the conversation with students in classrooms, I want to ask if she's been raped, right? Is this forced upon her? I used to ask students to write a psalm. Let's see. I did actually, but that's not necessarily pertaining to this. I was trying to remember how it came up. I one time had a student write that Bathsheba had always been into David, and that she was very willing, and that this was kind of a dream come true for her. And the story upholds that possibility. That is a possibility. I'm not denying that, right? And it's kind of interesting to read it through that lens. Now, what happens next, however, I think changes some of that and or removes any of the, it didn't matter if she was game. What happens to Bathsheba next and next and next is not talked about and is also deeply unsettling and disturbing, in my opinion. Okay. So this is the opening scenario. People don't want to talk about the fact that David has forced himself upon this woman. They don't want to talk, right? I mean, her man is a Hittite, which means he is fighting alongside David's people, David's men. So he's not an Israelite. So he's a foreigner living in their midst. Uriah has gone to fight for David, right? So there are really interesting political elements going on here. All kinds of interesting things. Let me skip back over and see if there are any comments I need to. Yeah, the Hittite is quite important. It's not adultery if you murder the husband. You guys are fun. Okay, I'm going to skip back over the story. So here we go. So that's the setup. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Poor Bathsheba, no voice. Notice she has not said anything. So she sends word that I'm pregnant. Okay, so David sent word to Joab, the commander. Send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked how Joab and the people fared and how's the war going? You've been out there 6 weeks or so, 6 or 7 weeks, right? David said to Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet. Okay, here's one of the fun things about this, folks. The feet, especially when you're talking about men, is often a euphemism for a man's genitalia. It's not always that, but it does make things interesting when you're trying to differentiate between when it's feet and when it's metaphorical. We have passages in the Hebrew Bible that talk about the water of the feet, like when a man is holding his penis out to pee, the water of the feet. We have all kinds of passages that make it clear that foot or, this is a euphemism, okay? It raises questions in the story of Ruth, right? When she goes and lays at Boaz's feet, covers his cloak over her, uses his cloak to cover herself, which is a euphemism for, getting down. And, is she, when you lay at his feet, is she doing a tea or is she spooning? All those kinds of things. The narrative actually isn't entirely clear, but it does seem to me it's a euphemism. So David says to Uriah, go home and get some action with your woman, right? Uriah went out of the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king. But Uriah slept at the entrance of the king's house with all the servants of his lord and did not go down to his house. When they told David, Uriah did not go down to his house, David said to Uriah, you've just come from a journey. Why did you not go down to your house? Uriah said to David, ever the upstanding gentleman, the ark in Israel and Judah remain in booths, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house and eat to eat and drink and to lie with my woman? You can see that the English says wife there. As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do such a thing. Also, Uriah is probably anticipating going back to battle soon, and according to legend and some passages, you're not supposed to release that tension that way so that you have more of it built up for battle. David said to Uriah, "Remain here today also, and tomorrow I will send you back." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day. On the next day, David invited him to eat and drink in his presence and made him drunk. And in the evening, he went out to lie on his couch with the servants of his Lord, but he did not go down to his house. So, desperate times call for desperate measures. In the morning, so just so everybody's tracking, David gets Uriah's woman pregnant. So he brings Uriah home and tries to make him have sex with her so that it looks like his, right? Just so we're all clear. That's what's going on. And Uriah, whether or not he's figured out what's going on, is being an upstanding soldier and is not having sex, not having it. He's taking one for the team, basically, right? And staying faithful to what a soldier would do, essentially. So, in the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter, he wrote, "Set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him, so that he may be struck down and die." So Joab kept watch over the city. As Joab kept watch over the city, he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew there were valiant warriors. The men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the servants of David among the people fell. Uriah the Hittite was killed as well. Then Joab sent and told David all the news about the fighting, and he instructed the messenger, "When you finish telling the king all of the news about the fighting, if the king's anger rises, and if he says to you, 'Why did you go so near the city to fight? Did you not know that they would shoot from the wall, you idiot? Who killed Abimelech, son of Jerubbaal? Did not a woman throw an upper millstone on him from the wall?'" You know, horror of horrors, to be killed by a woman. "So that he died at Thebez. Why did you go so near the wall?" Then you shall say, "Your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead too." So the messenger went and came and told David all that Joab had sent to him to tell. The messenger said to David, are you all noticing like this just long drawn out story? It's all about David covering up his, covering his track. Anyway, "The men gained an advantage over us and came out against us in the field, but we drove them back to the entrance of the gate. Then the archers shot at your servants from the wall. Some of the king's servants are dead, and your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also." He didn't even wait for David's anger, right? He's just going to put that in there. David said to the messenger, "Thus you shall say to Joab, 'Do not let this matter trouble you, for the sword devours now one and now another. Press your attack on the city and overthrow it.' Encourage him." When the woman of Uriah heard that her man was dead, not the wife of Uriah that her husband, but the woman of Uriah heard that her husband was dead, she made lamentation, that her man was dead, she made lamentation for him. When the mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his woman and bore him a son. Now, I don't know about you, but I have not been married, period. But I also have not been married, had someone have my partner murdered and then force me to go marry him. That has not been my reality. I'm hoping there are not many people here or watching this later for whom that is the reality. But can you take a moment to pause and reflect on that? Because we had 4 verses at the beginning and now 2 verses here out of 27 verses talking about Bathsheba's situation. She mourns him. And then she's forced to go be with David. Now, there's a part of this that's helpful because now she's a widow, and so David is going to take care of her. There is that, right? Do right by her, get married. She's number 4 or 5 though, like, just so we're clear. It's not like he's needed another woman. But notice in all of this, she still has no lines, and it doesn't matter what she wants. We don't have any reflection of it in the story. And this chapter wraps up with, but the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. Just so fascinating, because which part of that is it that displeased the Lord? I'm going to swing back over, look at comments real quick. Oh, hi, Digital Hammurabi. That's so fun to see you. Yeah, how on earth is David a hero and king? Yep, exactly. Right. I mean, the question that I raised, and I don't know that you, but this is, is known as a man after God. Really, and is the one psalm. It's a psalm that I used to really like when I was in my evangelical days. I have a bit of a dark streak to me, and so the intense, confessional thing really kind of jived for me. And anyway, so Psalm 51 was one I actually really enjoyed singing in Bible study or in worship or whatever. And so it's the psalm that is reflecting this story, but it's really troubling also. So we will look at that briefly once I get to the end of the main part of this story. So the thing David did was displeasing to the Lord, and the Lord sent Nathan to David. Nowhere does it say what the it is, the it that happened. Is the it happening just David accessing someone else's property, right, for sex? Is the it the cover up? Is the it, and which part of this whole scenario is displeasing to the Lord? It isn't clear. And even the little metaphor coming up here, it's not entirely clear which piece David is being punished for. So let's keep reading. Also, please keep in mind Bathsheba this whole time, right? Where is she? What's happening to her? She's not given a single line so far, right? People like to make a big deal after we get past this stuff. Well, and then she's manipulative in terms of getting her son Solomon into the king, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, because it's the one way she has some power in the situation. Like it's really fascinating how often people will spin women in the most negative way from these stories without any sort of reference to or reflection on what life would have been like to be in their shoes. So let's keep going. Nathan came to him and said to David, there were 2 men in a certain city, the one rich and the other poor. The rich man had very many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing but one little ewe lamb that he had bought. He brought it up, and it grew up with him and with his children. It used to eat of his meager fare and drink from his cup and lie in his bosom, and it was like a daughter to him. That just all of a sudden made me very uncomfortable. Oh, dear God, that passage about not having sex with animals, and then I don't think that's what he's doing, but goodness, that whole setup right there just caught me off guard for this time. I've read this how many times? It was like a daughter, dear and precious to him. Now, there came a traveler to the rich man, and he was loath to take one of his own flock or herd to prepare for the wayfarer who had come to him. So he took, I would suggest I'd need to go look at the Hebrew, but I'm pretty sure that can allow for so, not but. So he took the poor man's lamb and prepared that for the guest who had come to him. Then David's anger was greatly kindled against the man. He said to Nathan, as the Lord lives, this man who has done this deserves to die. He shall restore the lamb fourfold because he did this thing and because he had no pity. Nathan said to David, you are the man. Seminary, we like to refer to that a lot. You're the man. Do you remember there was a phase? There's a time 30 years ago. Okay, I'm dating myself. All right. Nathan said to David, "You are the man. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel. I anointed you king over Israel, and I rescued you from the hand of Saul. I gave you your master's house and your master's women, English says wives, into your bosom, and gave you the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that had been too little, I would have added as much more." I need a pause because I might forget to come back. Did you notice how house and women are property? Even according to the Lord. Biblical marriage, right? Marriage in the Bible, women are property. Whether it's the prophets or God speaking, women are property. Picking up, why have you despised the word of the Lord to do what is evil in his sight? You have struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and have taken his woman to be your woman and have killed him with the sword of the Ammonites, of all people. Those incestuous bastards. Now, therefore, the sword shall never depart from your house, for you have despised me and have taken the woman, English says wife, the woman of Uriah the Hittite to be your woman, English says wife. Thus says the Lord, I will raise up trouble against you from within your own house, and I will take your women, not wives, before your eyes and give them to your neighbor, and he shall lie with your women in broad daylight. For you did it secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel and in broad daylight. David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. Nathan said to David, you're damn straight. I mean, now the Lord has put away your sin. You shall not die. Nevertheless, because by this deed you have utterly scorned the Lord, the child born to you shall die. Then Nathan went to his house. Before we move on, I need to comment on some things here. I already commented on verse 8 when it talks about property and women as property. So houses and women. Houses come first, of course. It's still not clear which part of this is despised, is the part that the Lord is upset about, because it sounds very much that it's about offending Uriah to me. You don't have to agree with me on that. But it sounds to me like the offense is all against Uriah. He's killed Uriah. He's taken Uriah's property. He's had sex with Uriah's property. This is all offenses upon offenses piled up against Uriah. And verse 11 and 12, when I stop and think about them, I wanted to not, but I can't, but I need to. That's one of the reasons I'm doing this whole story time thing. Verses 11 and 12 make me very upset. I will raise up trouble against you from within your own house, and I will take your women before your eyes and give them to your neighbor. Literally just objects. These women are just objects. And he shall lie with them in broad daylight. We've got a little free porn show going on here. We've got all kinds of great things happening. You're getting to watch somebody take your women. You're being forced to watch this. However you want. I don't care, because these are women. These are human beings that are being treated this way because of David, because of something David did. They're going to be treated that way. It's disgusting. It's awful. And no, and people don't, where's the conversation about that? Right? You did it secretly, therefore I'm going to do it back at you in broad daylight, as if that's the ultimate punishment, is for David to have to watch someone else have sex with his women. Who gives a rat's ass what this does to the women? It's just awful. And what's interesting, again, is I'm making a leap here to connect with my former evangelical fundamentalist self. David here says, I've sinned against the Lord. And the Psalm 51 says, I've sinned against you only have I sinned, right? This idea that when people sin, they sin against God. And we just need to do away with that, because even the story itself says he sinned against Uriah. I mean, in the framework of ancient adultery, he's actually sinning against Uriah, not the Lord. But in the context of the psalm, the we'll look at the psalm together. But no, when people are trained to think about sinning is only a problem between me and God, you don't matter as much. Like, that's a problem. I have a problem with that, right? Bathsheba has been sinned against. Uriah, if you want to put it that way, has been sinned against. But she's the one who's been sinned against the most, and never is that said in this story, ever, right? So, all right. So we need to keep going with this story. I want to wrap up this before I go read Psalm 51 with you. So let's take a quick look at the chat. David was quite atrocious. Yes, he was. Yes. He got caught. All these different things. Great, interesting. The Lord was displeased over the whole scope of events. I think the taking Bathsheba, deception towards Uriah, the planned ultimate. Let me just put this up here since I'm reading it. Deception towards Uriah, planned ultimate death. The Lord was not upset that David took her for a woman. I agree that I don't see that being a problem, but I want to be clear that, and I agree. So I agree with your comment, but I also just want to be clear that the whole scope of events includes how Bathsheba was forced into the situation. And I don't see that being addressed anywhere. I don't see her being treated as a human being with full rights as a human being who deserves to be, to have consent as a part of the situation. So I didn't mean to, I don't mean to call people out when you make a comment that I disagree with. Because I agreed with most of what you're saying. And the whole point of me doing this whole, live story time is to get to engage these stories that people are very familiar with and make sure that people are not looking past some of these really important things for humans. And it often has to do with enslaved peoples and women who are getting the shaft in these stories. So let's read the next section. And this is interesting too, because the heading here, Bathsheba's child dies. The story itself is interested in punishing David, not Bathsheba. She is punished for what he did by her man is killed. Now she's being forced to live with him, although there may be a side benefit in terms of, support. And now her child dies. Like, she didn't deserve any of that. And that's not talked about. Bathsheba's child dies. Yes, that is. Thank you for saying that. Excuse me. But again, I feel like the grit, the meatiness of these stories and the pieces of them that are so horrific are still being kind of danced around, or we're being misdirected away from them by these labels and things, and the translations themselves that overlook the fact that women are property. They are taken, not married. They are women, not wives. Men are men, not husbands. So the Lord struck the child whom Uriah's woman bore to David, English's wife, and it became very ill. The Lord did this. That's a whole tangential conversation I'm not going to get into as much as I'd love to. David therefore pleaded with God for the child. David fasted and went in and lay all night on the ground. The elders of his house stood beside him, urging him to rise from the ground, but he would not, nor did he eat food with them. On the 7th day, the child died. It's awful. It's awful. It's an awful thing for a parent. I don't care how atrocious you are as a parent, as a human being, to lose a child. Just want to comment on that. It's awful, right? So there's that. And the servants of David were afraid to tell him that the child was dead, for they said, "While the child was still alive, we spoke to him and he did not listen to us. How then can we tell him the child is dead? He may do himself some harm." But when David saw that his servants were whispering together, he perceived that the child was dead. And David said to his servants, Is the child dead? They said, he is dead. Then David rose from the ground, washed, anointed himself, and changed his clothes. He went into the house of the Lord and worshipped. It's an interesting response, isn't it? Cried, maybe? I don't know. Screamed at God, but worshipped? That's fascinating. But the Bible keeps doing that to us, setting that as an example. He then went to his own house, and when he asked, they set food before him, and he ate. Then his servants said to him, "What is this thing that you have done? You fasted and wept for the child while it was alive, but when the child died, you rose and ate food." He said, "While the child was still alive, I fasted and wept, for I said, 'Who knows? The Lord may be gracious to me, and the child may live.' But now he is dead. Why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he will not return to me." I do want to return to this. This could have been the translation committee's attempt to remind everybody of Bathsheba's presence in this story, since she's not named at all in the death of her first, or the death of this child, right? Then David consults, so maybe that was their attempt, that was their effort to, so I shouldn't be so hard on them, maybe. Then David consoled his woman, English his wife, consoled his woman Bathsheba, and went to her and lay with her, as you do at the death of a child. And she bore a son. And so we didn't get Bathsheba mourning anything here, right? We didn't get anything about her, right? And she bore a son, another son, and he named him Solomon. The Lord loved him and sent a message by the prophet Nathan. So he named him Jedediah because of the Lord. And that's it. I mean, obviously, she comes, not obviously, not everybody knows these things, but she does come back into the story later in terms of her role in Solomon's life. But this is it, right? 25 verses in this chapter, 25 and 27 in the previous. She gets not a single word spoken, right? And her own child is dying, and we don't get to see anything. It's all about David. It's all about David. It's all about David. The whole 2 chapters is all about David and how he's going to try to cover his own ass or, fix the problem. So let me come back over to see if there are any comments here to comment on. Most modern males in JC's circle are not. Yeah, I think it's important to note this. Hi, Ryan. Caltastic. It's nice to see you. Yeah, you could look at it as Yahweh taking a firstborn son as a sacrifice. I think I feel strongly about wanting to separate the sacrificial language, which is a form of worship, from what's happening here, which we're told is a punishment to David. Those are 2 very different realms in my mind. And sacrifice is the primary way for worship to happen, right? And so I'd like to be clear about that. And sacrifice was a thing that was required, that was laid out for people, and yada yada. This was a punishment to David. Sorry, I've got a tickle in my throat and I don't have water nearby. This was punishment to David that also dramatically affected Bathsheba over and over and over again, right? She had no choice in going to his house in the first place. She had to live with the fact that she was prego by him and that he tried to cover it up, make it look like Uriah's. That didn't work, and so her man was killed. This is a second offense against her, in my opinion. She's forced to live with him. Again, there may be a silver lining there. Her child with him dies. How is any of this fair, right? She's done nothing wrong, literally done nothing wrong. And her life is torn apart by David. So that's the thing I want to make sure people are thinking about. We're going to go look at Psalm 51 and then we'll wrap this up. So So we're clear, these kinds of headings, so these are called superscriptions. These are in the Hebrew. And a prayer for actually, I should go look at that. This part might be added by the I don't have my Hebrew Bible with me right now. Let's just go look it up. Let's add the parallel, see what happens. A prayer for healing and pardon. I know that the to the leader, a Psalm of David. Oh. Is in the Hebrew, but I don't. Yeah, they've added that. Never mind. That helped. Okay. Okay, that's just so fun to see that. I just need to say it. I know several of the people on the committees who did the Revised Standard Version and some who did the updated edition. I know some of the people, right? So I'm aware that I'm calling out people I know right now, but this is driving me crazy, right? These headings that are added, because it's insufficient. It's insufficient. All right. So the part here, this is in the Hebrew, to the leader, a Psalm of David, when the prophet Nathan came to him after he had gone into Bathsheba. It's one of the few that's so specific. So specific, right? So there's no questioning when this was, what scenario in David's life this was written in response to. Whether or not David himself actually wrote it or someone in his court wrote it at the time or later, reflecting back, we don't know. We're told that David is a musician, so he may have. It doesn't matter. What matters, I think, biblically speaking, is it's attributed to him and it goes it connects to that story. That's the intent here. So have mercy on me, O God, according to your steadfast love, according to your abundant mercy, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. So far, it sounds pretty good, right? For I know my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me. And here's where I get tripped up. Against you alone have I sinned. Survey says. And it pisses me off because people sing these lyrics. People take in these lyrics, internalize them and their meaning because it's in scripture, and that they're being taught directly and indirectly. And when it's connected to song, that goes in deep. That sinning is about you and God, and it's not about fixing the relationships on this world, in this level. And, okay, you get my point. Against you alone have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight, so that you are justified in your sentence and blameless when you pass judgment. Indeed, I was born guilty, a sinner when my mother conceived me. This is, I like to point this out when I'm in classrooms, so I'll point it out now. This is not a nod to original sin. This is more, again, I can't prove this, but I think this is much more of a, oh, I'm just so utterly unworthy. I don't think it's, I don't think this is a way of saying, see, God, see, original sin, we are born guilty. No, this is more coming out of just a reflection of how guilty or how terrible the person writing the psalm actually did feel, right? This idea of being just, I was born even before my mother even conceived, I'm just so bad. That's what that is, not original sin. You desire truth in the inward being. Therefore, teach me wisdom in my secret heart. Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. This is a really interesting line, because in other contexts, whiter than snow, whiteness is actually a curse in other places, not always good and positive. It's a very interesting little side note there. Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones you have crushed rejoice. Hide your face from my sins and blot out all my iniquities. Anyone here sing this as a teenager? Create in me a clean heart, oh God. and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence. Oh, yeah. Anyone? And do not take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and sustain in me a willing spirit. Then I will teach transgressors your ways, and sinners will return to you. Deliver me from bloodshed, O God of my salvation, and my tongue will sing aloud of your deliverance. O Lord, open my lips, and my mouth will declare your praise, for you have no delight in sacrifice. If I were to give a burnt offering, you would not be pleased. The sacrifice acceptable to God is a broken spirit. A broken and contrite heart, of God, you will not despise. I want to talk about that. I see a lot of people today talking about confession and forgiveness in really self-detrimental ways. And I see people talking about breaking others, needing to be broken, as if that's a good thing. And if that is all it takes to get you back to a good relationship, or it's the only way you can show that you really mean it, or all these different things. And I just want to say just a lot of people I know are already being broken by daily life, being the level at which the sinfulness is being talked about in biblical texts, and the kind of spiritual demise, or it's that's an awful thing. The sacrifice is a broken spirit. I don't like being at the place of being broken in spirit. And it's not because I'm arrogant or whatever. It's that, like, that speaks to me of depression and utter depths, not this sense of, oh yeah, I really blew it. I need to go fix things up with this person. There's a lot of language in the Bible, both testaments of the primary Christian Testament, primary testaments of the Christian Bible, that are very extreme in their language, that I need to call out as, no, I'm not okay with. Do good to Zion in your good pleasure. Rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Then you will delight in right sacrifices, in burnt offerings and whole burnt offerings. Then bulls will be offered on your altar. So did anyone see anything about, I don't know, what happened to Bathsheba as being addressed? Trick question, because, well, not really trick question, but like the answer is no. There's nothing in there that tells us that that her life mattered. There's nothing in that psalm that tells us that she had been thrown under the bus time and time again. However you want to look at that. She is the recipient of just awful things, right? And none of it is addressed in the biblical story, in the psalm that reflects that event, whatever it is. And that, sure, we see what we should expect. A patriarchal society is protecting this patriarch, and he's called on it. And he's punished for it. Right? He loses a child. That's awful. That is awful. But none, all the other things that he does in the meantime, not just sending Uriah to death, but in order to get Uriah killed, they had to go do a stupid move in battle, and other lives were lost. Not to mention just battles in general. I just don't even want to get started on that. But the manipulation, emotional manipulation, just the taking of her to begin with, it just doesn't sit right with me. I feel like we need to, biblically speaking, we have a whole bunch of males who are important to the two primary religious traditions that base their traditions off of Hebrew Bible, right? So for Judaism and Christianity, and I know tangentially Muslims do to a certain extent as well, but I'm more comfortable talking about Judaism and Christianity because the Quran takes some of these ideas but uses them very differently. That's not a critique, that's an observation. And so that's why I'm only talking about Judaism and Christianity. And now I've lost oh yes. So we have quite a few men in these stories in these scriptures who are um, who would be going to trial for sexual abuse today. You know what I'm saying? Like Abraham and Hagar. We've got Jacob, and he's forcing himself on the two women living in his home. David, the way David fails to stand up for his daughter. Again, none of this is unexpected. It's all entirely expected, and that's why I'm talking about it. I want to make sure people understand this is biblical relationships. These are biblical things that get to transpire, and people still get to go out and be, heralded as heroes instead of called out on their shit. So I guess we'll look at Tamar, David's daughter, next time, since I've just brought that up. And then we're going to go back to Leviticus to read some of the stories there that apply. They will be laws again. They will be ideas that kind of sound like laws or function as laws for them. They don't sound like the 10 Commandments, but they are still laws because they are commands being made in the biblical context. So yeah, we'll look. It's such a hard story, but we'll do it. We'll look at Tamar and how she is treated by her half-brother and how David actually fails to respond. Isn't that lovely? Okay, these folks, who stand in as role models, maybe don't actually. You're welcome, Moon Pearl. Thanks for showing up. Maybe they ought not to be such important role models, right? That's the takeaway on that part. Thank you for being here. Those of you who were here live, thanks for watching later. Those of you who do so, I appreciate it. It's just great. Thanks for the banter. And I will be back on Tuesday. See you then to talk about Tamar.